let's talk about these roster cuts for the Indianapolis Colts. Of course, there were a lot of them, right? And I'm not going to cover them all. Just look up Colts transactions on Google and you'll be perfectly fine, right? Like you'll be in business right there. But what I will do is cover the ones that I view as particularly notable for this team, right? And speak to why that is. I'll try to keep these at least somewhat organized by position. And we're going to start in the secondary. The Colts traded a sixth rounder for some dude from the Vikings, who we will learn about as time goes on. I don't really know all that much about him at this point, and most of us don't know all that much about him at this point. We know he's coming off a torn ACL, and we know the Colts kind of like him for his versatility. But other than that, we don't know much. But when they did trade for him, as fans, you did have to feel, right? You had to understand that someone that we viewed as a fixture in this corner room was going to be the odd man out, and the casualties ended up being Juju Brents, Chris Lamons, and Samuel Womack. Jonathan Edwards, how about him? I mean, what a specimen, huh? I mean, you're talking about an undrafted rookie out of Tulane making the roster over a guy in Juju Brents, who was a second-round pick now in, 2 years ago, 2023, in the same year as Anthony Richardson. I mean, we're going to see what he brings to the table. Samuel Womack, to cut him, that's one thing, right? Because he was claimed off waivers from San Francisco last year. They hadn't invested all that much in him. I thought he was perfectly fine for the Indianapolis Colts last year, kind of given how deep into the rotation they had to go. But at the same time, the Colts secondary struggled heavily last year, and he was a part of it, right? So to get rid of him is a move that I feel is perfectly fine in the name of raising the floor, right? But he's the type of guy that you could always dip back into free agency if you want to. I forget if they put him on the practice squad already. Point being is Samuel Womack's a guy that technically you could bring back if you had to, if you have a whole bunch of injuries. But of course, that's not in the Colts' plans. But it's really not Womack that I think is much of a discussion. It's more so the other two in Juju Brents and Chris Lamons. Not so much that I think they were the wrong moves to make per se, but again, I think there's discussion points. Starting with Juju Brents, I mean, tough move for the Indianapolis Colts to make, right? And I think commendable that they would go on and cut him. I mean, to cut a guy who was a second round pick 2 years ago and to kind of admit that failure is something that, listen, I mean, you can't say that the Colts aren't running a meritocracy over here, right? Like, obviously, they're trying to put the best possible guys that give them the best possible chance out there, right? If that wasn't the case, you wouldn't have an undrafted rookie making the roster over a guy in Juju Brents who was a second round pick not all that long ago. And with Juju Brents, I mean, we all know what the deal is. It's been injuries with him, right? There's never really been a question about his talent. And it's just unfortunate to see it play out the way it has. I mean, the first time I saw him at training camp in his rookie year, or was it his rookie year or his second year? Point being is I got to see him go out there. I think it was his rookie year. He was coming off the wrist surgery. And he was kind of just out there. I think I was there for his first practices as a rookie. And he was just one of these guys physically. When you're talking about kind of the tools he had, his build, really lanky guy, like really long arms. He was one of these dudes that physically just looked different than everyone else. And that's one of the best parts of training camp is you get to go there and kind of see what it is that there is to see before everyone else gets to see it, right? That's the fun of going there. And Juju Brents was a guy right from his rookie year. I kind of liked what he brought in terms of his talent and his physical tools. Like he was just a guy that looked a little bit different than any other corner in the room at the time. But at the same time, it doesn't really matter how much physical ability you have. Of course, as they always say, the cliche goes, the best ability is availability. And Juju Brents just wasn't able to do that. But no surprise to see him claimed off of waivers by the Miami Dolphins. That'd maybe be an awkward week one interaction, right? But we'll see Juju Brents. Hopefully he doesn't do anything to make us regret it in week one, right? Then Chris Lamons, the other guy that for me, I mean, I'm a fan of his. So let me just, full disclosure, I'm a fan of Chris Lamons, right? Great preseason out of him. And honestly, the reason I really like him has nothing to do with this preseason. I just think that he's never really done the Colts wrong when they've had to go to him. I think he's filled in admirably for them in the past, particularly in the slot. Last year, he had to come in for Kenny Moore in a game or two, and I thought he did real damn good. And while I don't think, or rather I didn't think he was going to make the roster for the Indianapolis Colts, I do somewhat feel that he's a guy that consistently gets sold short. Sure, he's 29 years old, and you probably don't view him as a big piece of your future, but at the same time, all he does is come in and be reliable. Like when Chris Lamons is in, he's kind of one less guy to worry about overall. Of course, now you have the Colts working out a guy in Mike Hilton in the slot who's not far removed from being one of the elite slot corners in the game of football. But I do kind of have a funny feeling that they're going to need Lamons at some point during this season, and he's on our practice squad right now, so we'll have to see. But that's kind of where we're at with the corners. Overall, I would have to say it is kind of hard to argue with how this team has attacked the secondary as a whole this offseason and even now, right? I mean, think about Luan Arumo, of course, our defensive coordinator, but also a guy who kind of specializes in the secondary. Before he was a defensive coordinator, he was a secondary coach, right? Chris Hewitt from the Baltimore Ravens, widely respected secondary coach in this league. I've been with the Ravens for, I think, over 10 years, right? You bring in a Charvarius Ward, Cam Bynum. Of course, we lost Wiley to the ACL, but he was really coming on as a rookie, right? Before that happened. And again, they've continued to be aggressive with guys like Xavier Howard and trading for the guy from the Vikings and looking at Mike Hilton now. Listen, if the secondary does not work out for the Indianapolis Colts, particularly at corner, it's kind of going to be hard for us as fans to look at the organization and say they didn't do their part on that front. I mean, I think they've done everything you could expect and more to try to bolster this secondary and have really turned it into a room that I think is something that we have to be excited about overall, right? Like if you're going to be excited about anything as a Colts fan, you got to look at the defensive side of the ball in the secondary. And compared to what we've seen in years past, it got to at least be optimistic about what it is that we have in front of us. Of course, we don't know anything to be true until it is, right? And those guys are going to prove us right or they're going to prove us wrong on the field. But the corner room right now, overall, feeling pretty good. And again, I think continue to just be aggressive. I don't think they had to really do that to satisfy many of us, but they went and did it anyway. So let's stick on the defensive side of the ball and let's go to the defensive line. And really, there's two guys on the defensive line that I'm looking at and wondering how the cuts are going to age, right? And those guys are Isaiah Land and Tim Smith today as well, upon claiming a linebacker from the Jaguars, another guy whose name I can't produce right now. And quite frankly, no disrespect to him, no disrespect to the guy from the Vikings, but I'm a Colts fan. I'm a football fan too, but I'm a Colts fan. I mean, if I don't know, you have to, if you want me to know your name as an Indianapolis Colts fan, you have to do something for the Indianapolis Colts, right? If not, I mean, I'm not going to be able to refer to you off the top of my head. You just got here. But neither here nor there. Let's talk about Isaiah Land first, because he was a preseason superstar for this team at defensive end and a guy that really they've been quietly developing for quite a period of time. And I remember when Chris Ballard first got him, they claimed him from the Cowboys, and Ballard going into that offseason, I forget what year it was, maybe 2022 or something like that. And they said they kind of really liked him, and it proved true. I mean, they kept him around a while, and we really started to see that development shine through in this year's preseason. Now, unfortunately, defensive end, a position for the Indianapolis Colts that is pretty deep, and you kind of have guys right now on the roster that you're either heavily invested in or have proven production in this league, right? I mean, you think about guys like Latu and Kwity Paye and JT Tomalu and Taekwon Lewis, and the list can go on, right? Samson Ebukam. And really the only guys on that list of guys, if you were to pull up the Colts defensive end group, that you can really argue that Isaiah Land would make it over are Taekwon Lewis or Samson Ebukam. And the problem with that, of course, is that a guy like Taekwon Lewis, much like JT Tomalu that they drafted in the second round out of Ohio State, he's a guy that can play both inside and outside. So if it's kind of a third down pass rush situation, you can put a guy like Taekwon Lewis kind of inside into kind of the defensive tackle position, right? In the 3 gap or the 5 gap, something like that. And you can kind of make sure that he's not just an edge rusher on the outside at defensive end, but you can kind of move him around your defensive line. And then Samson Ebukam, even though he's coming off the Achilles, is a season removed from being this team's overall sack leader. So you kind of combine that with, again, the versatility of a Taekwon Lewis and really his proven production too. Like Taekwon Lewis has been a solid player for the Colts. Isaiah Land kind of was just wrong place, wrong time, right? 6'4", 240, kind of really only a pass rusher, all things considered, but one that is 25 years old and can clearly play, right? Like he's clearly a guy that could produce at least in spurts in this league. Of course, we don't know if he's a full-time starter or anything like that. As I record this, he has not been added to the practice squad. I haven't seen him get claimed by anyone. So I don't know what the deal is there, but he's kind of a guy I'm looking at and saying, we may miss him as fans. I don't know. This may be a distant memory. In 5 years, there may be not a single Colts fan who remembers the name Isaiah Land. We don't know, but we'll see, right? And then Tim Smith, 6th rounder out of Alabama, run-stopping type of guy, at least in terms of kind of why you drafted him, right? And he's a guy that I would assume is going to be on the practice squad if he does not get claimed. And I will say this about Tim Smith, and it's really it's less about him and more about an overall worry about the Colts right now. I'm a little bit worried about this team's ability to stop the run at the moment. All the work they've done in the secondary. And at linebacker, right now, I mean, you have a lot of unproven guys. And then we know, obviously, how great DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart are. But think about last year, this team, there was a 50% increase in the amount of rushing yards they were allowing when only Grover Stewart came off the field. Remember, he missed a few games for was it an injury? Was it PEDs? I forget what it was that Grover Stewart missed time for specifically. But when he was out, they had a real hard time against the run. And you look at the personnel right now, not much has changed on that front, right? And I am kind of looking at the defensive tackle room, and you have guys like Adebawore and really Neville Gallimore. Where's the beef, right? Where's the beef? Like, where are the guys that if Grover Stewart were to come down that can help us against the run? Because the linebackers at the moment, you have Zaire Franklin, yes, but guys like Joe Bocci, I don't really view as a guy who's like a run stopper. I think he's all around, like, seems like a pretty solid linebacker. We'll see what he brings. I'm excited about it. But you got him, Carly's, whenever he comes back. He's a guy that's a safety converted to linebacker, so you don't feel really great about his ability to stuff the run. Sagan Olaby, sure, a small sample size. He's kind of the shining light here. Last year, he was the number one rated run-stopping linebacker out of eligible linebackers by PFF. Take that as you will. Again, small sample size, but maybe he's a guy that could come in and do a little something for them on that front. But right now, I'm looking at the Colts' ability to stop the run, and I'm not convinced they're going to be able to do it. We're going to see if that plays out the way I think it might. But for me right now, it's definitely a worry, particularly when you kind of look at the secondary and say, man, they've done so much to address that side of things and really not much on the defensive line in terms of notable moves, right? In terms of guys that are going to help stop the run. So we're going to see how that goes. I don't think it's a failure by the organization on that front. I mean, how many things can you possibly do in one offseason? But just something I'm keeping an eye on, right? And when you think about losing a guy like Tim Smith, I wouldn't be surprised if as the season goes on, they kind of flip around and say, we need someone else here at depth at defensive tackle who has a chance to stop the run and is familiar with what we're doing. That's where Tim Smith will kind of come back into the fold, right? Now let's switch over to the offensive side of the ball. And we got to start with Jelani Woods because he's a guy that, much like Juju Brents, just bursting with potential, but could not stay on the field. And, Jelani Woods at 6'7", 260, 270, 280. I mean, listen, that's the type of build. I mean, he was having a lot of hamstring issues, and he had been finally put together a healthy offseason here and into the preseason and was pretty good in the preseason as well. Like, he contributed. But also, I mean, one of the things that it seemed like was pretty apparent for the Indianapolis Colts, you think about them cutting Juju Brents, cutting Jelani Woods, also benching a guy like Anthony Richardson. And it seems like one of the things that was a really, really big deal for this team going into this season is making sure that we can trust the guys that we have out there in the reliability sense. One thing to trust whether or not they can play. You have who you have. But in terms of staying on the field, are you reliable? Do we know that we can trust you to be a fixture on this roster this year? The Colts seem to really make sure they prioritized trusting a guy can stay on the field. It's just something I pointed out. But Jelani Woods, kind of disappointing the way that's played out. Of course, now we have Tyler Warren, and all is forgiven. But once upon a time, Jelani Woods was the guy that we were kind of all excited about, right? Jelani Woods, in his rookie year, I mean, he had some moments. He had 15, 20 catches. I feel like I remember them all. I mean, I would be sitting on my couch, and Jelani Woods would pop off the screen so much that I was waiting for him to fly out of my TV into my living room. I mean, that was kind of how electric he was as a rookie. But of course, it's what have you done for me lately league? And all he's done for us lately is pull his hamstring, essentially, right? And have like a decent catch at the end of a preseason game that I think was a catch, in all fairness, and they called it not a catch, but neither here nor there. Not the point. That's Jelani Woods. If we switch over to the running back position, Khalil Herbert, a guy that they brought in this offseason, practice squad now. Well, okay. I kind of like that they went with Giddens and Goodson because one of the real things that I thought when they signed Khalil Herbert, I wasn't all that crazy about the signing in the sense that when I looked at the type of running back the Colts needed coming into this offseason, you needed a guy who could come in on third down and give you something, both as a pass blocker, but as a guy out of the backfield who could catch the ball, right? Jonathan Taylor, as great as he is, that third down set isn't exactly his best look, right? That's not exactly where he excels per se. That's certainly not what got him his contract. Let's put it that way, right? And when they brought in a guy like Khalil Herbert, I looked and said, well, okay, he's kind of just like a very, very poor man's Jonathan Taylor. Like, he doesn't bring anything different. Instead, what he does is kind of give you that same downhill running style that Jonathan Taylor gives you. And I thought, well, okay, but you haven't really addressed what I thought you needed to address. Well, in comes DJ Giddens and Tyler Goodson, who I think Colts fans are going to learn to like as time goes on. Everyone associates him with that 4th and 2 situation against the Houston Texans a couple years ago with Garner Minshew, where he dropped it, Minshew missed the throw, whatever it is that what you want to call that. It was a play that could have been made, and he was part of it, and they didn't make it, right? But he's had good moments for this team too, and quite a few of them that get overshadowed by kind of that one big moment. And between him and Giddens, I'm kind of excited to see with Jonathan Taylor how they're able to change the pace. I think the Colts should kind of have a fun running game this year. We're going to see how that plays out. But all right, that's how I feel about Khalil Herbert. And then we'll stick on the running back real quick. Not that he was ever going to make the roster, but how about Ulysses Bentley, the fourth? I think fourth, right? I'm too much of an idiot to understand Roman numerals. A V with the I next to it. That would be 5 minus 1. That's 4. He's the fourth. Okay, I think I got that right. He was a guy I thought ran well in the preseason. Like he was never going to make the roster. He's now on the practice squad for the team, but I would just like to point him out because he's a guy that I like the way he ran the ball. And I think if we needed him in a pinch to kind of be a scat back, he might be a guy that could come in and produce for the Indianapolis Colts. Nice find there by Indy. And happy to have him on the practice squad. And then final note on the offensive side of the ball, Wesley French, really not all that much to say other than the fact that we lost Will Fries this offseason. And now we lost Wesley French, meaning the era of French fries is over here in Indianapolis. And that, for anything, that's brutal because, who doesn't like potatoes, right?